The day.
Today's hand of the day is brought to you by 888 Poker. Hey guys, it's Alec, Torelli, and welcome to an episode of the hand of the day. This week's episode is brought to you by 888 Poker, and it comes from a high-stakes cash game I played on Poker Night in America in Pittsburgh. I'm really excited to announce I'm going to be going back to play 3 consecutive episodes of Poker Night in America in November, so I wanted to take a minute and highlight one of the fun hands that I played from my recent episode in Pittsburgh. These guys are awesome in Pittsburgh. They have a ton of gamble in them, and the game was playing huge. The blinds are 25-50, and the normal buy-in is anywhere between 5 and 15,000. But in this hand, and for a lot of the game, there was a straddle and even a double straddle. So we're effectively playing 25, 50, 100, 200, no limit hold'em, and it's a big game. There's 7 players at the table, which means there's a lot more action. And in this hand, I pick up the action in the cutoff with Queen Jack offsuit. I decided to raise. And the big blind, who was very loose, not so aggressive, but just in a lot of pots, had some gamble in him, ups to call. I feel like he was going to be calling light here, and it's a good spot for me to raise pre-flop because it's likely that I go heads up to the flop with a player out of position who's playing a lot of hands. We go heads up to the flop, which comes Queen 9-6 rainbow. Great flop for me. There's a lot of hands he's defending with pre-flop that are worse than mine, and even though I have some sort of a vulnerable top pair, I feel like my hand is going to be best here a very, very large percentage of the time. My plan here is to bet the flop, charge him for draws, and get value for the times that he has a worse hand like mid-pair or bottom pair. He checks, I bet 800, and now he makes a raise to 2,300, which was a very atypical play from this player. I hadn't seen him check raise hardly at all, which makes me think that he doesn't likely have a top pair type of hand, especially when the pot is inflated so big pre-flop and we're playing such a big stakes game relative to the normal size of the game that we've been playing. It's unlikely that he's going to make a check raise with top pair in such a big pot when it's going to compromise a lot of his stack, right? He risks putting himself in a spot where he doesn't know what to do if I 3-bet. If I call, the pot is very big. Now he's got like, 1 or 2 pot-sized bets left, and he risks, going all in and going broke with a top pair type hand. So this leads me to believe that the hands that he could have in this spot are either bluffs or 2 pair or better. So it's a very simple math equation here. There's so many more possibilities of bluffs than there are of 2 pair or better if my read is correct, and so I opt to call the flop, and I'm planning on calling down a lot of turns and rivers on the rest of the hand. The turn comes a 7 for me, which is a complicated card to play. If he was bluffing on the flop with anything that had some sort of equity, like gut shots or straight draws, it's likely that the 7 helped him. So if he bets here, it's a tough spot, but I'm probably going to call again and see what happens on the river. Fortunately for me, he checks, and I have an easy check behind, both for pot control and perhaps to bluff catch on the river. The river comes a 5, which completes a 1-card straight. He goes ahead and bets 4,500 very quickly, and I want to stop for a second and talk about the size of his bet here. I understand that it's only 3/4 pot size bet, but you got to remember, we're playing on average a 25-50 game, so 4,500 is essentially a buy-in in our 25-50 game that we're playing when there's no straddles. So it's a massive size bet relative to how the game is playing. I understand that it's only 3/4 of the size of the pot, but I think what's much more important to focus on in live poker is the tendency of bet sizes of the table. So this bet size is very big for the size of the game, and it's big for the player. It's big for it's one of the biggest hands we've played so far, and so it's a sizing that makes me think that his range is very likely to be complete bluffs or only straights. I don't think he would ever bet this way for value with something like 2 pair. I think if he had 2 pair, he'd bet like 2,500, 2,200, and even though that's a very, very small bet, it's much more fluid with the size of the game, and it feels much more normal to me. So this bet stood out to me, and it kind of was like a little shocking, and it made me think he was very likely to be completely on a bluff or have a straight. I also had a little bit of a live read with how he reacted, how he bet so quickly, just the way he threw his chips in the pot. But that's something to keep in mind in the flow of particularly live poker and understanding how to interpret bet sizes. So now I just had a simple math equation, right? I also had to go with my live read and say, did I think he was bluffing? Did I think he had it? I thought he was pretty weak here in this spot, but I also had to figure out, okay, are there enough possibilities that he's bluffing to compensate for the times that he has an 8, right? He could have an 8 in his hand, even with something like Jack 8, for example, and just, got there on the river. So in this spot, I thought he was bluffing enough at the time. I had a pretty simple call when I think about it. I think that he has so many bluffs here, like with something like Jack 10, King Jack, or whatever. There's just enough things that missed. He might even have something like 10-7 and just decide to turn it into a bluff on the river because he realizes like he can't win the hand. So I think there's just enough possibilities of bluff here that I have to justify calling. But I think the thing to keep in mind is understanding how your opponent is likely to react when he has strong hands and how he's likely to react with bluffs. If he has strong hands, he's always going to bet the river, right? He's always going to bet the river with an 8, but not all opponents are going to bluff 100% of the time they have their bluffs. In this particular spot against this player, I was certain that if he had a bluff, he was going to bluff with it. So this meant to me that his range was very unbalanced because he was going to bluff 100% of the time, which means his bluffing frequency would be too high. I was getting a decent price on my call. I didn't have to be right that often in order to profitably call. And ultimately, I thought about it for a minute and it led me to calling the river. So, key takeaway from this video is understanding how to read your opponent's range in certain spots, what they're likely to have, but also understanding how they're likely to react the times they have strong hands and the times they have bluffs. Short and sweet, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have hands you'd like me to review, please send them to me on my blog, alectorelli.com, and subscribe to my channel. I've got a lot more content coming out soon, putting out a lot more stuff from Poker Night in America. Thanks a lot for watching. See you guys next week for the hand of the day. Cheers.